Hey everyone, and welcome to Rambling Reviews, where we analyze different types of media and or their cultural relevance. My name's Christian, and this is Amazing Fantasy number 15, the introduction of Spider-Man, my favorite superhero and many others' favorite superhero as well. Spider-Man was originally created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. Basically, Stan Lee had come up with the character, the idea, and everything for Spider-Man, whereas Steve Ditko did the artwork. This would hold true for the comics as we go through forward here. The story would be done by Steve Ditko, and the story would be done by Stan Lee, and the art would be done by Steve Ditko. Whenever that changes in the comics, or we cover any other material with this character, I'll be sure to let you know if when that creation process changes. But for the beginning here, in 1962, when this was released, it was Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. They were the dream team for Spider-Man in the early years of the Wall Crawler. Now, as we open the story, we open on Peter Parker being a very, very timid, very, as the cover even says, he's a timid, meek, timid teenager. But we really see that in the beginning here with Peter very much being kind of a wallflower, where he's hanging off to the side as his fellow peers, his fellow classmates discuss going to a dance that they're going to be having soon. I imagine it's a school dance they're getting ready to have. It's never entirely explained from what I understand, but in any case, we are introduced to interesting, important characters kind of right off the bat here. There's this character in the yellow here who kind of points out to Peter, or not to Peter, but points out, he's like, "Hey, why don't we invite Peter along? He might want to join us." And then we have this character here in the blue and white striped shirt here, who is actually Flash Thompson. Many people are going to be familiar with him, I'm sure, but he just simply explains, "Nah, forget that. He's a loser. He's lame. He wouldn't know a cha-cha from a waltz," as they say, which I'm sure was a very scathing insult back in the 60s, but now, of course, not so much. The blonde girl here in the red, by the way, you might think that that's Gwen Stacy, but that is actually Liz Allen, and we're going to see more of her continue as we, continue the series here. But yeah, we're already introduced, Peter, Flash Thompson, and Liz Allen right off the bat, characters that are going to be extremely important in Peter's life especially the early years of Peter, I should say, as we move forward here. Now, although Peter does not have that great of a time with his peers at school, he has an incredible relationship with his Uncle Ben and his Aunt May, who basically took him in from the time that he was a young kid and raised him. Now, I can very much relate to this because I was raised by my grandparents, so I understand how that is. In my case, they actually adopted me and raised me, so it wasn't where I called them grandma and grandpa, because they weren't. They were my parents. In the case of Peter Parker, his Uncle Ben Parker and Aunt May Parker are not his parents, or they never, adopt him. They are just his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. But these guys mean the absolute world to him. He doesn't really care much for others. In fact, he even says the rest of the world can go hang for all he cares, as long as he's got his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Doesn't really care about much else. They're really the only people that truly cared about him and loved him, and things of that nature. So we do have a moment where we see Peter he does incredibly well in regards to his schoolwork as well. He's even basically gifted a scholarship from his science teacher. They say he could get a scholarship when he graduates at the rate that he's going, because he absolutely excels in school. But again, not so much with his peers, and especially not with the ladies. He tries inviting this girl, Sally, to go out with him, and she just simply explains, she's like, "Peter, how many times do I have to tell you I'm not into you? Besides that, why would I be with someone like Flash Thompson around?" Peter is very much the kind of nerdy Poindexter type of guy, whereas Flash Thompson is very much the jock, very confident, kind of brutish type of guy. You could kind of look at it where in modern terms you would say Peter is very much kind of a beta male, whereas Flash is the alpha male, if you will. Now, we're all familiar with the story by this point, but the event that Peter was actually inviting Sally to was that of a science exhibit where they are testing radiation and how they can control it. Now, we understand, of course, these days that radiation is not really something you want to play around with. However, back especially in this time, it was just a common way to do things like, give superheroes powers and things like that. So again, we know the story from this point. A spider gets caught in the radiation ray, lands on Peter's hand, bites him, and he immediately he tries to smack it. He ends up getting sick and walking away. Everyone around him kind of thinks that he's just being kind of a pussy about it, being weak and a wimp, a loser, whatever phrase you want to use for it. But as he's walking away, he notices as he begins to walk home, he notices that there's a car barreling down the road toward him, and he instinctively jumps out of the way and begins climbing on a building next to him. Now, as he does so, this kid even points out to his mother, he's like, Mom, look, that man's crawling up the side of a building. To which she responds, that's it. No more horror movies for you. Now, I like to think that this is a nice little kind of nod to the seduction of the innocent and the comics code of authority. For those that don't know, basically the book Seduction of the Innocent by Dr. Frederick Wortham was essentially this book that talked about the evils of comics and all of these different things. Horror movies and stuff were in it too. But it was essentially like a satanic panic kind of thing of the 50s and 60s. It's what led to the Comics Code of Authority, which would be a seal that would basically be there to say it's okay for your kids to read this. Now, it was a very early example of kind of the think of the children, pearl clutching kind of censorship that we still see to this day, where, in the 50s and 60s, it was things like rock and roll and comic books. Later, it would become things like Dungeons and Dragons and rap music and all those different things. And, then now, of course, it's anytime you see a gay character or something in a movie or TV show, it's grooming, as many of these pearl clutchers will like to say. So, it's one of these examples where we're always seeing the same kind of talking points and same culture war issues with these kind of things repeating themselves over and over again. And I think that this is a very interesting example to see that kind of thing take place even back then. So it's just interesting little kind of food for thought there. But Peter realizes that he also has incredible strength as he grabs a chimney pipe and bends it. He realizes and puts together pretty quickly that these abilities that he has, these powers, are the result of the spider bite. He decides he needs to do something with these powers because he has this super strength. He has the ability to walk down telephone poles like a spider can a web, all these different things. He comes across a wrestling event where they're offering $100 to the person who can last 3 minutes with Crusher Hogan, which is like a big time local wrestler at this point. So Peter decides to take on the wrestler here, and I really like this moment because we see that. So one of the things here is we see Peter's first costume, and what we see is he's basically wearing like a white sweatshirt, some kind of like fishnet mask, and a like blue slacks or something like that. You're taking on Crusher Hogan, and of course, he's kind of like, are you kidding me? Like, this little pipsqueak's going to try and take me down? But, with Peter's agility and his strength, that doesn't really show directly. He does, in fact, take him down. Now, unbeknownst to Peter, there's also an agent that has actually been scouting the event, sees him and decides to start working with him. He goes up to Peter and he's like, hey, you took that guy down really well. Why don't you work with me, and I can get you in magazines, movies. I can even get you on the Ed Sullivan Show. And for those that are unaware with how important the Ed Sullivan Show was back then, it was essentially where. So one of the big things about it is it was where the Beatles basically got their start in America, or at least really blew up in America. They were already pretty big in the UK until they came over to America, but once they started once they were on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1963, that was when they really blew up here in the States, and we had the start of what was called the British invasion. This comic was made just a year before the Beatles took the stage in Ed Sullivan on the Ed Sullivan Show. So clearly, this agent working with Peter definitely knows his stuff, and the Ed Sullivan Show really was a big deal back then, especially. So we have this moment where Peter is now deciding to, make a better costume for himself, and he also, of course, is developing his web shooters, his costume, the whole thing, all right under the noses of his Uncle Ben and Aunt May. He develops his web fluid, his web shooters. This is where we see the first shot of his costume. You'll notice he has these kind of web wings that are under his arms. This was a common thing that Peter had for a long time in the early years of Spider-Man. It's something that kind of survived, if you will, in things like the adaptations, like, say, Spectacular Spider-Man, which is my favorite adaptation of Spider-Man, and it even existed to an extent in the, it kind of exists in the newest Marvel Spider-Man 2 game, where you have Peter and Miles being able to glide with their web wings. Interestingly enough, Peter never really glided with the web wings until that, and well, there's also in Far From Home he glides with them, but until those things, I'm not familiar with any time period that he actually used them to glide. But in any case, they're more or less kind of for show. I'm not really the biggest fan of the web wings, but it is what it is. In any case, Peter starts working, with the Ed Sullivan Show, and everybody is just absolutely loving him. He is performing incredible tricks. He does this odd thing where he shoots webbing at a candle, and I think the idea is he's supposed to be putting the flame out. But in any case, he really wows the crowd and just is doing absolutely incredible. But one of the days after the end of his performance and on his way out, all these people are kind of hounding him. They're like, "Oh, Spider-Man, I want to talk to you. I can put you in magazines. I can do this. I can do that." All these different things, and we do have this moment here where I kind of think that this guy is a kind of precursor to JJ, J. Jonah Jameson, because this guy in the middle here, just to me, he looks like him. To me, he looks like kind of an early, what would kind of be used later as the framework, if you will, for J. Jonah Jameson later. But Spidey's kind of letting everything go to his head. He's like, "Hey, see my agent, boys. I'm busy." Now, as Peter's leaving, and again, we all know the story by this point, but as Peter's leaving, a criminal is running from a cop in his direction. Peter just lets the guy go through, and the cop berates him for it. As the criminal is entering into an elevator, he even says to himself, he's like, "Wow, it's a good thing that guy let me through. Otherwise, he might have been able to take me out." And the cop, he discussed something. He's like, "I ought to run you in." And we have this incredible moment where I just love Peter doing this really sassy walking away moment where he's like, "Talk to the hand." I do want to point out as well here, you can notice that Peter's spider emblem is blue. His back spider emblem is blue. We know it today, of course, to be red. And what's interesting about that to me is, I don't know, I haven't really been able to figure out for sure if that was a lighting thing that they tried to do, or that they actually did intend to make it blue. But in any case, we'll see later where it does become red at some point, but it doesn't really fit with the lighting, so I don't really know what the reason is. I think it was originally meant to be blue, and then they decided to make it red because it just looked better. The blue kind of blends in a little bit too much, so I definitely appreciate that. But so, once Peter kind of, told the cop off and everything, he is just living life incredibly well. He is having just a great time. He's still not doing too well in regards to his peers and things of that nature, but his Uncle Ben and his Aunt May have recently bought him a new telescope, and since Peter is very much a nerd, It's a big deal to him. He loves it. He loves the whole thing. So he's having a great time as Spider-Man. Everything's going well. He seems on top of the world. But then tragedy strikes. He comes home one night and finds that a police officer is at his house. Confronts the police officer and they explain, sorry, son, your uncle died tonight. A burglar came in and shot him. Peter's extremely angry, furious, and the cops like, I understand your anger, but don't worry, son. We're gonna go ahead. We're gonna make sure we catch him. And Peter is just extremely, they tell him he's at the old waterfront, and Peter decides to take it upon himself to suit up as Spidey and go after him. Now, I do want to point out, by the way, from this point, I am going to be referring to Peter and Spidey interchangeably because they are, of course, the same person. So I just want to, yeah. We have this little moment here, and I really like this, where you can see that as Peter is getting on the costume, there's a little tear coming from his right eye, and that's such a small detail, but I really do like that. I think it really means a lot and really works for the character here. So Peter tracks down the criminal, the murderer, to the old water tower, and so the criminal's thinking, all I got to do is hold up at this here at this warehouse, and I'll be home free. When Spider-Man shows up, and I really love this shot because you see him crawling down to the criminal, all menacing. Again, this is supposed to be really dark, like it's dark in the area and everything too. And well, we'll touch on that later. But yeah, so I just really love this shot because he's really crawling down to him like a spider, and he's menacing. He's far from the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that we know him as today. He is very much out for blood and absolutely ready to kill. The guy tries to, shoot Spidey, but he is able to quickly web his gun up, punch him, and knock him out. The guy's a regular dude, and Spidey's got extreme strength at this time. For those who don't know, Spidey normally holds back when he fights enemies, but at this point, I don't think he's holding back. He probably ready, like I said, he's ready to kill this guy. So he notices, once he gets him in the light, that this is the same man that he let free, and that he is basically responsible for the death of his uncle. The cops are trying to figure out still how to get him and everything, when all of a sudden, Peter webs down the guy, the criminal. He webbed him up and sends him down to the cops. He thinks to himself that he could kill him. He could, get rid of him right now, get his revenge, but he realizes that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So he instead realizes that, the right thing to do is to send him down to the cops. And from this point forward, he learns the lesson that with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Now, I do want to mention this as well. You'll notice that in the original comics, Spider-Man didn't actually, Ben Parker wasn't the one that delivered that message to Peter. It was just a narration that Stan Lee had written. But in any case, you do also see here, this is the one panel where Spider-Man's back symbol is actually red like we know it to be now. It's not blue, but so again, I don't know if it was intentional or what, but if you're going with the lighting thing, it should technically be blue, right? But in any case, that is the end of Amazing Fantasy 15 and the birth of a hero. Like I said, Spider-Man is my favorite superhero, and looking at this story even specifically, you can see very easily why this story still to this day really stands the test of time, and people, even in adaptations and stuff, it's not really changed that much. There are a few things here and there, but it's more or less expanded on than anything else because there's not really much you need to change. This is a damn near perfect story and superhero origin story. It's very much on the same level of something like Batman's origin story or Superman's origin story. You don't mess with it. It's that good. In any case, these are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Follow me on social media for more. Subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like, and if not, I hope you find something to do like. Later, guys. Peace and love.